Hey, so this is the second video on this channel highlighting all the out-of-bounds content that you can find in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. This time I'm focusing on Security Breach, using a universal camera tool made by Otis, aka Franz Buoma. Alright, so let me show you what I found. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is something that is in the main game, but you can't see it by normal means. Now that's a pretty obvious given for the nature of the show, but in this case the engine that's used to make Security Breach makes it really easy to hide geometry that's not going to be used in the game. And so I had to restore it by putting in a command function. By reloading this area of the game, we could see a lot more than what was originally intended for the final release. So now if we pan the camera all the way out for this starting area of the game, I'm going to highlight in yellow all the areas that are completely unused. All the way over here, players can see a backstage type area, and to a player not paying close attention, it could look like it's fully rendered from the window. But truthfully, it's just a developer technique to give the illusion of depth. Taking the camera through the window will show you that there's only a void, but by restoring the map to its entirety, you can see that the developers originally intended for that area to be fully modeled, flipping many assets that are already available to you in the game, but still a layout that's completely different from anything that you'll be able to see. Another fascinating thing that wasn't used in the game are shortcut hallways that seem to be placed next to every single dressing room for all the characters. Although you can't see the doorframe on the outside, taking the camera on the inside and restoring these hallways can show you where the doorframe would be in relation to the dressing rooms. There are 3 in total, and where they would lead is the same areas that you would basically go to if you were inside the dressing room and you went to their backstage areas, with all the custodial stuff and the staff robots and whatever. And they were likely removed because in the final game there's no reason to go back there at any given point, at least not that quickly. And lastly, there's a kitchen area for the staff. Taking the camera over here will just show you what the developers originally intended. Again, a big, massive open area that wasn't necessary to the final game, and I'm sure it was removed just to avoid confusion to the players. Now, this episode won't be all about restoring unused areas. It's going to be a lot more about taking the camera outside the boundaries of various things. That's what the show is mainly about. But another completely unused feature to this game was a character model viewer, one that was probably likely meant to be used by the players because there was a whole interface and everything, but moving the camera will show you that there's a whole bunch of water silos lined up behind this unused area, which is really bizarre. It may just be an in-joke between the developers, or possibly they're placeholders for a function. But anyways, let's move on from that subject onto looking inside of models. And I'm talking about character models, object models, whatever. And we'll start off with Springtrap here. If you take the camera inside of Springtrap's skin, you can see the skeletal remains of his nose. And there's even more interesting stuff inside of models, but before we get to that, we need to talk about the sponsor. So this is pretty cool. We had one of these in Cambridge, Massachusetts, though there are many other locations. The sponsorship this week is Micro Center. Now, there's lots of good reasons why you want to go to Micro Center. Maybe you need a new keyboard or a monitor or a new mouse. There's a great selection of those things at Micro Center. But here is the biggest appeal about going to Micro Center. It's a walk-in store with competitive prices for computer parts. So instead of going to some website and waiting for all the parts to arrive in the mail, if you're really excited about building your PC and you want it at a competitive price, Micro Center's got you covered, and you can get anything you need to build a new PC the same day. And also, this is something I didn't even know that they had, but this is a really useful tool. They have a PC builder feature on their website, so you can pick out all the parts beforehand, and then you have all your PC parts ready to build, and then you just go into the store and pick it up, or you can pay a fee to have professionals build it for you if you want. Micro Center is also giving my viewers literally free stuff. All you have to do is just print out this coupon by following the link down below. You can just give them the coupon and they're going to give you this flash drive and this micro SD card. Find out if there's a location near you. Trust me, if you're building your new rig soon, it is one of the best places I've ever gone to. It is basically a candy store for techies. I swear to God, you will thank me later. Thank you, Micro Center, and back to the show. Also, with all the main animatronics, taking the camera inside their heads will show you that the skeletal portions are fully modeled. A great example of this is with Roxy here. And then this one is really bizarre. There's a gold statue of Monty outside in the hallway, and taking the camera inside of this statue will show you a strange skull, one that's not even in Monty itself. Like I said, they get those animatronic frames, whereas inside the statue, it's more of a mess of geometry, but if it resembled anything at all, I guess it would be a skull. Here with this little trash can, you can see a beta element. Taking the camera inside of the snout will show you that there's a beta snout that shares the same texture sheet as the eyes, and then a little nose that has some 3D geometry to it. And then we have Mini Music Man here. Taking the camera inside of his mouth will show you that he has cogs. And also, this is where the model starts before it jumps down and does the jump scare towards the player. This is of course being the first appearance of Mini Music Man. And taking a close up to these little cockroaches can show you the level of detail that they have. These models do not have any textures. It looks like incredibly basic compared to something like the Dead by Daylight episode. And although it may not look like it, their little limbs do animate a little bit. Also, here's a fun little out of bounds thing for the PC players. When Freddy is in the parts and service area for the first time, before you can open the door, if you take the camera inside and take a close look at him, you can see that there are PlayStation controller button prompts all over every single individual area that you would eventually get when you work on them. And they are all uniformed to the triangle symbol, which by the way, I was not using a PlayStation controller, so this is truly a default image. Also, this is pretty cool. I'm pretty sure in certain areas you can see Gregory's model, but normally all you see is Gregory's limbs, and it's very few instances in which you can see the model. But one of the easiest ways to get a really good look at the model is by going up to the parts and service computer, and once you've accessed the menu, if you remove the HUD and look outside into the 3D environment, you can see for whatever reason, the game calls in Gregory's entire model. And now we can see all things like his socks, his shoes, the band-aid on his knee, and everything in between. The arcades are a really interesting thing. This is an example of the modeler having an idea in their head about how their model is supposed to look initially, and then change their minds. By taking the camera inside some of these arcade cabinets, you can see a duplicate image of what's being shown on the screen that the player sees, only it's in that tilted CRT version of an arcade, where it seems that in the final version, the developers decided to make them LCD screens. It's also possible that they made this correction because you can see the top and bottoms of some of these textures and show the bottom part of the textures on top. Anyways, with all that said, let's do a zoom out of the laser tag maze. Alright, now we're just going to talk about things that you can find out of bounds. And it's not by restoring any files. This is literally what you would find in the final build of the game if you could just clip through a wall. And the first thing I want to talk about is this clean version of Freddy Fazbear in a T-pose. Once again, in the first area of the game, if you clip through the wall with the portraits next to the main stage door, you'll find Freddy Fazbear here. And he is here throughout most of the game. In fact, I can give you a side-by-side comparison of clean Freddy and damaged Freddy closer to the end of the game by ejecting Gregory right next to him. But anyways, here's an area that you can barely see in the main game. It's the outside of the main entrance. Normally it's super duper dark, but thanks to Maz's help, I learned that there is a way to access the full bright command for this game. And by doing so, you can see the road in its entirety, you can see that the ground is mostly dirt, and that there's a lot more trees than you can normally see, but better than all of that, honestly, is that when you get to the end of this area, you can see a guard shack. And on the opposite side of the guard shack, there is something written on one of the posts. It says Gate 1. Now, I haven't taken the time to explain all of this just yet, maybe I will in a little bit, but the game loads in quadrants. And so you'll see remnants of the other areas that didn't get clipped out or unloaded correctly, but sometimes you'll find weird objects far outside the boundaries that have nothing to do with any of the existing areas. And in the daycare center off in the void, you can find a Freddy Fazbear onesie that's completely unused. Well, to clarify, this one is at least. Duplicates of this model exist in other parts of the game. Also, for the very start of the game, you can see how the mirror works. Funny enough, you can see Gregory in the reflection of this mirror, but because Gregory is so short, the player normally can't see Gregory's reflection. And also, when you become Freddy Fazbear, his arms are stored out of bounds. Also, just because players would want to know, there's various times in the game where characters just kind of walk off screen, and I'm sure a lot of players want to know where they go. Here's the first instance of this where you see Vanessa through the curtains. And as she turns around to the line waiting area of Freddy Fazbear's changing room, she just disappears. And here's Vanessa disappearing yet again when she gets over to the gate after Gregory is hiding from her behind a medic curtain. Players will also want to know what it looks like when Monty is in his dressing room, as you can hear him thrashing around, but revealing all the geometry of the room will show you that he's nowhere to be found. It is simply an audio trick. Now here's a cool little Easter egg. This might not seem like much to the audience, but for a person who's been spending double-digit hours going out of bounds to try to find anything, there's this little Easter egg left behind by the developers. There's this roped off, out of order door, and if you take the camera inside there, the developers left something behind. It's a single air hockey paddle. Why it's there? I don't know. Maybe the developers hoped that one day someone like me would look. And if that's the case, well, congratulations, we are now broadcasting your air hockey paddle to thousands of people. Once again, just scratching the curiosity of the viewer. This is what it looks like when Gregory gets inside of Freddy Fazbear. Not incredibly exciting because Gregory's model is not fully rendered. Also, this is what it looks like when Gregory gets captured by one of the animatronics. For Sunny Drop's first appearance, here's what it looks like when he first comes into frame before the player's camera turns around to look at him. And also we can see where the model goes when he jumps into the ball pit. Once again, disappearing pretty quickly after he jumps in. I froze everything in the game just to get you a good look at this, but we can watch him pop out of existence here. This one's pretty cool. This is when you first see Moondrop, and the way this is pulled off is by seeing Sunny Drop fall behind the desk, only to reveal the Mr. Moonman himself. And this is what that looks like from another angle. Moondrop is underneath the environment, standing completely straight up. And as his animation begins, he starts to get less stiff.
Naughty boy, it's past your bedtime. You must be punished. Nighty-night.
Now this one's really cool. This area is flooded and the water is murky and somewhat opaque. So taking the camera underneath will show you some stuff that normally the player can't see. And by far the most interesting thing is that there's a couple of post-it notes, one of which is really hard to see because it's underneath the box inside the water. So it would be impossible to see actually. If you look very closely, although blurry, you can see that it is a doodle of Freddy Fazbear. Here's another cutscene with Vanessa where she kind of jump scares you and catches you. Now before she actually jumps out and gets you, she's stored in the void just underneath where the cutscene's playing out. But you can see the exact moment in which she pops into frame. Also, you can see where Vanny pops into frame, giving you the vanilla shot in the bottom right hand corner so that you can know the exact second in which she starts her path towards the player. Now here is a very detailed cutscene involving Chica. You'll see that the Gregory model is in full view. It's not just the arm, surprisingly, because the vanilla version of this cutscene doesn't allow the player to see the model whatsoever. So it's very possible that this cutscene was meant to have Gregory from a third-person perspective. So yeah, let's talk about something from earlier. Elements from the entire world of Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach can be seen at any given time, kind of proving that the entire game could technically load all at once, as it all exists in one space, and is not layered on top of one another. But it's still really cool to see various windows and doors that are exceptionally far away from each other being loaded into the world at once. If you kept a close eye, you should have been able to see Roxy and Freddy Fazbear in this shot. So anyways, here's some more unusual out of bounds content. If you load up Monty's Gator Golf, there's an object that is very far below the map. And taking the camera up to it will show you that it's a door frame with Freddy Fazbear's face on it, and then some white rectangular geometry, as well as a second piece of rectangular geometry. And even curiouser than that, by going all the way up to this object that was already far away to begin with, you can find a duplicate version of it even further away than that, adding more to the absurdity of this discovery. Anyways, moving on, the movie theater has a little secret that is not supposed to be shown to the player. I believe the model for the screen is in fact a giant TV, as it has enormous caution symbols on the back, as well as what looks like a TV mount. And again, this object is embedded into the wall, so no matter how much sleuthing you do in-game, you won't be able to see either of these things. Now, a little bit rare for Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, there is one instance where a character is supposed to jump scare you, and he's loaded in prematurely clearly it's Monty's first appearance, and that gate that he's supposed to break through in order to chase after the player is not where he in fact starts out. Instead, the mangled security bot room has him just outside the wall near the workbench, and he has an animation of an idle pose. Anyways, if you haven't seen it already, there's an even more impressive Five Nights at Freddy's VR episode that I did, and I will make sure to leave a link for that. And also, I'm super duper close to hitting that 1 million subscriber mark. I know the Five Nights at Freddy fan base is usually pretty cool, so if you want to help me get there just by hitting subscribe, it would mean a lot. But either way, thank you so much for watching. Take care.